Thank you so much. I've had to take off my jacket because I already feel we're going to prepare to have some robust and engaging conversation here this morning. But to introduce myself, my name is Lester Kiewit, and I host Good Morning Cape Town. You're on CapeTalk, my co-host.
And my name is Josey, Mahachi, host of DW South Africa Link. I am so thrilled to moderate this panel on politics, polarization, and the role of media, or as my friends call it, the Thanksgiving dinner drama. Our job here with Lester is to keep things lively, but not so controversial that we end up trending on X. Right. So let's get the ball rolling. In the past decade, the world has undergone profound changes that have reshaped our societies, economies, and political landscapes, from the populist waves triggered by the Brexit vote and Donald Trump's presidency to the global reverberations of the COVID-19 pandemic. These events have disrupted norms and heightened tensions.
And we've seen geopolitical conflicts from the Ukraine to Gaza. It's exacerbated instability. While we see a changing in demographics around the world, we have a migrant crisis that is testing the resilience of nations, but also the unity of nations. And of course, there's also the critically important issue of a changing climate and what the consequences would be not only on human life, but our natural ecosystems, our systems of government, and also our stable economy. So it's in this atmosphere, amid all these upheavals, we also face the consequences of what this means for democracy, its challenges, but also maybe the opportunities here. Josey, 2024 has been a very, very important year when it comes to elections. Over 2 billion people around the world in 60 countries have gone to elections. But while we've seen this political polarization, and I think it's reached unprecedented levels, we also have the compounding, the impacts of artificial intelligence transforming industries.
Which makes us wonder, are our jobs still safe?
That's
are they
right.
still safe?
And by that, we're also redefining the media landscape.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to be exploring these forces and the implications on democracy, corporations, cooperation, but also amongst citizens.
Right, and speaking of elections, I mean, we have the expert, the guru here, Ben Graham-Jones, who's a distinguished consultant specializing in emerging challenges to election integrity, with over 3 decades of experience in election observation and with great understanding of how digital platforms shape electoral processes. He'll also give us a temperature of electoral politics and give his insights into the evolving threats to democratic systems.
And here on my immediate right, we have Anna Collard, who's the Senior Vice President of Content Strategy and an evangelist for Know Before Africa. Maybe you can explain what a tech evangelist is. We'll have some proselytizing here today, but also how this has shaped the awareness of cybersecurity across the continent, how this also falls into national security on a geopolitical level. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you about how this contributes to us feeling safe or unsafe in this modern world.
Right. And last but not least, Pippa Green is an award-winning journalist, editor, and author whose work has shaped South African media for decades. With a career-spanning leadership role at the Sunday Independent, Pretoria News, and the SABC, Pippa has been at the forefront of journalism and media reform. We're excited to have you, my colleague, senior colleague.
But I also want to make a special acknowledgement to the German Consul General here today, German Consul General in Cape Town, Tanya Verheit. We appreciate your presence and also your support here. May we have a round of applause for our panelists? We also have some ground rules here this morning. We would not want this to be a one-way conversation between Josey and I and our panelists, but largely a forum of colleagues and citizens here. So when we do engage, and we'll give you an opportunity to engage, we ask for respectful, constructive contributions,
Right.
because we all are in the business of broadcast, where everything is run to the second. If you have a comment/question, we hope it's just a question, but comments will also be welcome, to practice brevity. And also, we are broadcasting and streaming this live on our CapeTalk social media, as well as Deutsche Welle.
Africa.
So, no, you are live as well. So let's get underway. Let's firstly set the landscape for where we are now. And Ben, I'll start with you and what you've been focusing on this year. Elections 2024, it's been a tough year for incumbent governments. While not a clean sweep by opposition parties and opposition candidates, it has been a tough year for incumbent governments. There are various examples. The United States, Argentina, the Tories were kicked out in the UK, Labour takes over in Botswana. For the first time since 1966, a Liberation Party is kicked out of government. And even here in South Africa, the ANC with 40% of the vote, it's only in government because of what it calls a GNU, rather broad-based coalition. Was this a shellacking of incumbent governments? Why? And why did largely no one, including the strategists, the pollsters, the advisors of incumbent governments, see that?
It really has been a seminal year, and a year in which I think we are learning a lot about elections themselves. Heading into this year, we knew, with this decades of research on polarization, to show that we like to associate ourselves with people who agree with us, with those who are going to reinforce our existing views. And yet what we've seen over the course of the year is polarization deployed as a strategy. And it's been deployed as a strategy often very effectively to divide up electorates. What this has translated to quite often has been a very divisive politics. In some cases, and in fact in many cases, that has seen incumbents lose power, not just in the big elections that everybody has been watching, but we've seen actually a real clear trend of this. And it really, there's data that shows very clearly that when there's a time of economic difficulties, that people will often penalise incumbents for that. But I think only time will tell, when we've really had time to step back and analyse how this year has gone, really what the factors at play were.
Josey?
And as we are sitting here as media, as journalists, the world is blaming us, saying we are the cause. It's all because of the media. All this is happening. For Trump to be there now, it's all because of the media. What have you got to say about that?
Well, I think that actually what we see sometimes with the traditional media is that they operate under laws and regulation, and in some ways it can offer a platform for bringing people together who have different views in a way that social media doesn't. We have a real problem of people spending almost their entire information existence surrounded by content which agrees with them, algorithms which are spoon-feeding them that content, those, including state actors, who try to undermine democratic systems by trying to foster that division and advance that division. And the media has that responsibility, a responsibility it must continue to uphold, to act as an antidote to that, to try to bring together different voices and allow people the oxygen to form their own opinions.
I see, Anna, you're nodding. I'm sure you want to add something. Do you want to add something at that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My background is more on the cybercrime and cybersecurity point of view, but the manipulative tactics that are being used, whether that's converged criminals or state-sponsored activists, whatever it is, they use the same mechanisms, and they obviously rely on the fact that, and in fact we've done a survey in Africa where 80% of the respondents said that they gained their news from platforms such as Facebook, TikTok. And first of all, how much news can you get from a six seconds kind of clip? But it is the reality, and unfortunately, people need to be made more aware of that these manipulative tactics, whether it's emotional content, whether it's flaming content, the echo chamber effect, all of these factors play into the polarization and the disinformation, and unfortunately also the vulnerability of the consumers to criminals, as well as the state-sponsored actors.
Probably if I can bring you into this, and with the utmost and greatest of respect, I started in this industry 20 years ago. Analog and tapes just moved to the side. And digital and online and DVD, that was what we were working with. So I know of a digital age of particularly broadcast. Now I'm entering into, along with others, into an AI computer generative age. And with the utmost respect, you've been in this industry longer than me. Is this the same almost seismic shift from moving from one aspect of a period of journalism and media to a period of digital? Now we're going cyber. Is there any similarities that you've seen?
Thank you, Lester. And I should say, just in relation to CapeTalk, what Josey didn't mention is that I spent 5 or 6 years here working part-time in the newsroom, which was a great experience because it's a wonderful local news station. But I think that the switch now is more than technological. So I also started when we were going in radio 25 years ago, when we were moving from cassette tapes to what we called Dalet in those days. You will remember on the SABC, where you actually could put your sound digitally on the computer. But there's more. It's more than a technological shift now. I think there's quite an important political shift, and it's exactly what you said about news being consumed through platforms that are not subject to any kind of standards, number one. Number two, for me, the most important thing about journalism, and it's something that Bill Kovac says in his important book, The Elements of Journalism, is that its discipline is the discipline of verification. And there is no need for verification on a platform like Twitter, or, with all due respect, beyond that platform now, Facebook, TikTok. And so you don't, a consumer doesn't know whether what they are seeing or hearing is actually verified or with the truth or being checked out. And as much as I might tend to kind of fly in the face of progress or go against the grain, I think it's really important for the preservation of the news media as an important element in our democracy that we retain that.
Right. And when she was talking about disinformation, I mean, that's rampant on all social media platforms. Now, sometimes you can even see a picture of me and Ben in a cozy situation. It's on Twitter, it's trending, and that's generated by AI. This is a threat. What do we need to do? And I mean, you are in this industry, and it has evolved rapidly alongside, obviously, the rise of AI and machine learning. What do we need to do? How do we use these technologies, influences, not to spread disinformation, but rather for greater use?
Yeah, so like with anything, technology is not either good or bad, right? It's how you use it. And it does have a lot of benefits. In fact, even from a journalistic point of view, you can use it to help with the fact-checking. There are AI-based fact-checkers tools that can be used. But unfortunately, it also enabled a democratization of, of power to people that maybe in the past, if you talk about propaganda and disinformation and crime and scammers, they've always been around. But the fact is now that they have access to tools that allow them to spread their message in a much more scalable, organized, systematic fashion. And that's what makes it so dangerous. But if we then look at it from what can we do about it as the consumer or as the media, etc., we need to also remember that the human intelligence that we have is still one of the things that we obviously need to teach people to hone. But if you think about, and this is, I'm a huge proponent of this concept called zero trust mindset. And in the cyberspace, this is something that's been around for many years, where we configure systems to not trust anything unless it's verified. Now, if you apply that to the human or to the cognitive mind, if you think about it, it doesn't mean that we need to walk around paranoid and look at everything mindfully, because that's not possible. It's too much cognitive effort. However, we need to hone a mindfulness, a meta-awareness that allows us to see if something is overly emotionally triggering, if something is too much confirming in our biases, and I'll give you a great example here quickly, and I don't know if who of you remember in this recent hurricane in Florida, there was like a meme that went around, or a photo that went around of a little girl, maybe 2-3 years old, with a puppy sitting on a boat, rain, and like this typical emotional photo, like horribly emotional, and people loved it. They shared it left, right, and center. Even when the fact checkers told them, look, this girl has 6 fingers, this is so obviously fake, it's generated, people still shared it. So they said, I don't care if it's fake or not, it represents my belief system. And that's the danger, is that you can have the best AI tech that tells you this is fake or not. It's our own biases, it's our beliefs, and that's what we need to move towards in terms of digital literacy training, is teach people to become aware of our emotions, our biases, and then use that as a warning signal to say, let's slow down, because this is too much what I believe in. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's manipulative.
That brings us into the conversation of trust. Who do we trust? Do we trust ourselves, or do we trust the institutions? And because we're in an international audience, different categories of labeling people mean different things. I'm just going to use, for shorthand, people are considered progressive, left of center, liberal center, and conservative to right of center. I think we can just agree on those parameters. What I appreciate, Ben, that we used to live in a world that whether you were considered a left of center, center, or right and center, we believed in fundamental things. The fundamental belief in what truth is. Secondly, we generally believed in institutions, whether you're in a Tory conservative government or whether you were Labour. You believed in the institutions of Parliament and the institutions of state. In South Africa, where the Afrobarometer survey says that people would appreciate some form of benevolent dictator if things worked properly. And it's not just South Africa. There's similar surveys around the world. But growingly, more and more people around the world say, we actually don't trust institutions, whether they be institutions of government or whether it be institutions of media. Where does the shift come from?
So disinformation has a really insidious consequence that leads to this. And we call it the liar's dividend. And it's the idea that if you throw around enough untruth, eventually people opt out of believing anything. They don't believe in the traditional media, they don't believe in the election management body when they announce the results, they don't believe in all of these different institutions that held up democracy back in the day. And it's a huge, huge challenge, because nobody can reasonably be expected to take the time to go and verify every single claim they encounter in any day. The consequence of that is that you move to the minimum, and you just end up with people buying in to the belief which correlates with their emotional state of mind, because it makes them feel good. And it's a hugely dangerous situation. But I think there's cause for optimism, because there's also important work that's going on to rebuild that trust. National Endowment for Democracy released a seminal report last week called Stronger Together, and it talks about the role of ambitious coalition building coalitions across society to try to restore that trust and enable those key institutions to communicate with the audiences they need to communicate to.
Yeah, and on that very note, Ben, we've seen also social media playing a greater role in terms of some governments that clamp down on the opposition. And the only platform they have is social media, X, be it Facebook, whatever, because the local media or the media is just for the government, right? We've seen that example in Zambia with the current president. Now, he won via social media. And now then, how do you differentiate? Because we now have also Donald Trump, who also won because of X, because of $1 million being given to people on X and all these things. So then how do we balance the two? How do we know which one is better, and how do we differentiate?
I was really, convinced, Josey, by Anna's point earlier, that the technology is about how we use it. What we see, for example, with malevolent actors is that they instrumentalize freedom of expression to violate freedom of thought. And so, I agree that your social media can be an incredible tool for empowering people in contexts where the state can misuse state media, like was the case under the Lungu administration in Zambia. And I think we all just need to make sure that we're combining efforts of maintaining that freedom of expression with critical thinking and encouraging people to understand what strategies are used to manipulate information. How can you check facts? How can you identify a deep fake? And if we do that, then I think we're equipping people with the tools to do that for themselves.
Sorry, Josey. Pippa, just on the continuation of the trust in institutions. Here in South Africa, we have a chronically ill SABC. We have moves within the UK where people are boycotting of paying BBC TV license. In the US, Republicans are actually defund NPR. You come from a background of not only journalism but also activism, and you were around the transition of building these important public entities. When we ask where did it go wrong, I have a thesis that says once we stopped paying attention to journalism of public interest, programming of public interest, children's rights-based edutainment and infotainment, we started seeing a decline in the participation of active citizenry, but also the upholding of human rights. And I'd like your thoughts on that, working within the SABC as well. Is it because our focus on what media entertainment is? It's all on demand. You can go onto a site and watch whatever you want, when there's been very little investment in public interest broadcasting, programming, even print media. I was a member of the Jelly Bean Journal on Saturdays, a very important kids-based newspaper. Your thoughts?
No, it's a very important, question, Lester. And just one quick point in relation to what Ben said about the rebuilding trust in institutions. There is the accountability. And the point about the print media is you have the Press Council here, and with the broadcast media, the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, which does enforce accountability, which social media is escaped from. But in relation to the SABC, so the SABC was one of the most exciting parts of the transition to democracy, for it went from being a state broadcaster to not only a democratic public service broadcaster, but an institution that focused on putting news in on all the stations in 11 languages. We actually had 13 languages in the end because there are 2 indigenous San languages in the Northern Cape that we included in that. And it was news, not talk. I don't mean to be dismissive about talk shows. I think they have a very important place. But news reporting, as you know, is expensive. You have to have reporters, you've got to go and check things out, you've got to pick up the phone, you've got to go to a township and see what people's service delivery is like, or you can just sit and get a lot of views that you can't verify when you're on air because you're not there, but you have to have reporters who will help you do that. And I think that what the SABC did was 2 very sad things. One, it became politically corruptible. In other words, people over the years, people sent in managers that were political lackeys, really, of principles. And 2, the financial stuff was just, it was not managed well financially. You know, Dali Mpofu left something like in R1 billion hole or whatever it was in it, when in deficit, when he left. And he wasn't the only one. There were others. So those were the 2 combining factors that have undermined the credibility of news. And as much as we talk about the internet, just one last point, that in this country, about something like 38 million people have said that they get their prime news from radio because they don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to newspapers. So it's really important to focus on broadcasting to ensure that there's accurate coverage of news. And I'm afraid we've we've left that, we have taken our eyes off that ball. And I think in order to make sure that South Africa doesn't go the same way as some of the other countries, we need to put our eyes back on that.
So is the absence of public interest program in the South African context, is that malicious or deliberate, or simply a consequence because of interference, of corruption, dwindling budgets, and therefore we cannot have proper public interest programming, and that then has a negative consequence on democracy?
I think it's the latter. I think that it was bad management and bad financial management, which then said, made people, the new managers and the new board that came in about 6 or 7 years ago, say, look, here's another way that we can go, let's ditch news. Because as I said, news is expensive. It takes commitment from companies to produce news. And it also becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling cycle when you go to Twitter, or you go to, what is Twitter's called now? X, yes, excuse me. Now run by a billionaire who's going to become one of the most powerful men in the world. That there's something wrong if we don't invest, we don't persuade people to invest in news. And I'm on the press council. I was ombudsman, but I'm a member of the press council still. And the press council, the state of the press council reflects the state of the media. It struggles to get media companies in some instances to pay their dues, and that's because there is huge financial pressure. So we need to talk about another funding model.
And a reality TV show is very, very cheap to produce these days,
Exactly.
instead of deploying journalists and videographers to wear the stories. Josey?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, the panel's theme here is emphasizing on cooperation amid growing polarization. Now, we need a solution. We need to know what happens next. 2024 was so busy, elections. Now, 2025 also, 2024 we still have Namibia, we still have Ghana, and 2025 we have Germany, my home, and also Ivory Coast. Then how can governments, media, and tech companies collaborate to foster, a more inclusive and tolerant digital public sphere?
I think fundamentally we need to make democracy sexy again.
Right.
That's what we need to do. What we know, what the research shows very clearly, is that if you want to motivate behavior change, you need to speak to people's hearts. Right? Now, we need to do that in a data-driven way. An organization I work with, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, has done incredible work, for example, on doing polling about who people trust within different countries, to think about how that can be built. So it needs to be evidence-based. But then you also need to start with, okay, who do people already trust? Influencers, sports stars, celebrities, community leaders, village chiefs, whoever it might be in that society.
But Kamala Harris tried that. It didn't work. She tried. She trusted the celebrities. It didn't work for her.
Well, I think maybe that's a fair point. And I think one of the things that Trump did was that he was able to take very, very simple messages, very easily understood, very easy for people to connect to things that emotionally mattered in their lives, and fire it at them with an amazing degree of message discipline over a multi-year period. In fact, almost a decade now. If you go back to the start of his first campaign, he's been saying the same thing. And we those who want to promote democracy, I think, and promote democratic values, need to think about how we too can inspire, and we haven't yet found the answer to that.
Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, talking about Trump, he really doesn't come across it, but he's extremely smart when it comes to manipulation, and he uses all the tools, and some of them is exactly like Ben said, it's simple messages that go straight to the heart, to the emotions, and again, it goes back to how emotions can be powerful to positively impact us, but also very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think from a solutions point of view, what we, and I so agree also with Ben, what he said in terms of collaboration as the only way we can solve this problem, is to work with, civil society, the governments, private industry, etc. And then also look at countries that actually have done some really cool stuff already. If you look at the Ukraine, at Finland, at Taiwan, they had to fight disinformation for many years, and they're doing some really creative, cool things, like, for example, using humor. in the Ukraine, they've got that war song. I forgot what it's called now, but it's basically mocking Russia's propaganda. In Taiwan, when disinformation went around about the toilet paper running out during COVID, they had a meme of the prime minister riding a toilet roll, and just taking the power out of these emotive disinformation campaigns through humor creation and involving the public. Transparency is so important, like really showing the citizens what the government is doing, how they can get involved in democracy building and policy making. So all of those are actually working strategies that we should look at as a country or as a continent even, and see how can we copy this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. And then personally, and, you probably can hear by my accent, like I have grown up in Germany. My kids are at the German school, and I work with the German school. We're actually creating a mindful technology use digital literacy training for the teachers as well as some of the students to teach, because it comes back to what I believe is so important, to teach us again to connect with our human intelligence, develop that meta-awareness that when we become emotionally triggered, to slow down before you just share or respond, and really hone that mindfulness.
You're right.
Yeah, I know we're talking about solutions, but maybe it's my Lutheran upbringing. You have to wallow in some nihilism first before you somehow get absolved of your afflictions. I'm so bogged, and I double guess and I second guess myself with consuming everything these days. A friend sends me a picture. Let me first go and reverse image search this before I share it on.
Yeah.
I may get it is incredibly taxing. It takes up a lot of your time, even though I generally have a good barometer of how to check whether this is...
And not everybody can check.
And there's a level of fatigue.
Exactly.
That you don't just consume news, now you have to analyze news. But on your question, on your focus on cybersecurity, and you said that the same strategy is used from conmen and crooks and nefarious politicians. Talk to me about how we often don't see the monetary reward of having an unregulated podcast or series on the internet where I'm going to have a big name politician, I'm going to allow him to ramble off, but here also sponsored by this energy drink, and how often tweets and posts are monetized simply to get a reaction from an audience, because that means ching, 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 it's going into my PayPal account.
And I mean, they're not just being used for legitimate businesses. There's been so many celebrities endorsing crypto scams all over. I mean, Kim Kardashian, she got sued for peddling some crypto scam. But if we go back to your initial point about that it's cognitively taxing, right, to develop this mindfulness or whatnot. And my research now is looking at ways, can we develop cognitive security or cognitive resilience unconsciously? To give you an example, when I fly up to Joburg, no offense, Joburgers, I love it, but when I arrive there, I'm automatically much more vigilant. Like, I will put my handbag at the back of the car, I'll check the robots, and I'm not stressing about it, right? And the same with the news. Like, I'm as critical as you are, but I tend not to, and I get it. This is always the feedback I get. Yeah, but it's so cognitively taxing if you have to check everything and you can't, it's too much effort and people will then just give up. And I think we need to find a way to teach them that you don't have to double check everything, but you have to check the stuff that's emotionally triggering. And that's that meta-awareness, right? And the stuff that's potentially confirming your bias already. Or the politician endorsing some stupid whatnot, right? So we need to teach people that ingrained unconscious intelligence, that their warning signals go off, and then their system 2 thinking, their slow thinking, their analytical mind kicks in when it's needed, not the whole time. If I consume some cat video on TikTok, who cares if it's generated or not? And that's also the point, is like, if we look ahead in 2 years' time or something, everything will be synthetically generated. I share a picture of myself, my hair looks much better, my pores looks nice, that's why you didn't recognize me early on. Because it's AI enhanced, right?
Yeah.
So you can't like the point of detecting whether something is deepfake generated or not, that's beyond the point because everything will be generated in the future. But it comes back to simply verifying things.
So when we're building a resilient younger generation, it's more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, some form of media, digital literacy.
Combined with your human intelligence, that if I feel my heart race or my emotions flaring up, that's a sign I'm being manipulated. These extortionists from Nigeria are targeting our teenagers with love bombing. Love bombing is a plain old simple social engineering technique. You know, that all of the stuff that the scammers do, the manipulators, those are not new tactics. They're just being
advanced.
They're being scaled up, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
but,
Pippa, did you want to add something before we open the questions for the floor?
In Nigeria, you know, in that I was there training journalists about 12, 15 years ago. And you'd go past houses in Lagos and there'd be a sign on saying, this house is not for sale. Because there'd be these scamsters who'd try and sell somebody a house they didn't own. But now that it's online, it's like just multiplied. But just one, I think that what you say is really, really critical. But there's one important point, and that's about democracy. And I think that it's really quite interesting and frightening that... And our 3 ex-South Africans have become pivotal in the media relations around the rise to power of a man who has told the world who he is. And Marty Barron, who was the last editor of the Washington Post, recalls in his book when he was there how in the first presidency of Donald Trump, he tried to get the post office to increase the price for Amazon products because Jeff Bezos owned the Washington Post and he didn't like how the Washington Post was reporting about him. So that's minor compared to what can happen now. And I do think that the message that we need to get out, and as elections are coming, is that some form of accountability by verifiable media reporting is essential for the democratic rights of citizens.
Right.
I'd like to, before I open it, if you could direct your hands to our lovely Bruce Hong there. If you put up your hand, and he will come to you. Before we do that, while you get ready, let me just again focus on how do we save a moment. I'm a little bit currently defensive and maybe in a counter-attack on how we attack misinformation, how do we attack aggregation of the news that we produce at a great cost. Do we, for example, Pippa, and I think Ben, you could also, because you speak to polarization and different encampments, I have a belief, Pippa, firstly, we save journalism in general. Journalists get off social media, because if you're going to be live tweeting your stories, you're giving it away for free. Secondly, it's easy to crop and paste. Crop a picture. I argue, for at least a limited time, news organizations, if it's not printed out, if it's online, splash your watermark. Make people see this is a photograph taken by a journalist who is trained in ethics and trained in accountability, who took that picture. So if anyone wants to share that online,
come on,
You're
my colleague, but now
this is a little bit in how we. But if it comes from a DW videographer or photographer, you know,
right.
A public will also know. Just your thoughts on that. Do we have to be proactive and not just sort of bob like a buoy in the ocean, trying to protect ourselves from the buffeting waves of disinformation and essentially the theft of professional journalists' work? Pippa?
Well, you know, one of the things the Press Council has been discussing was negotiations with Google to get some of the advertising revenue, because Google uses a lot of the products of journalism, which, as we've discussed, don't come cheap, and they're not for free. It looks like it's free when you just read it. But the more the better reported newspapers, okay, the more one might not agree with them, but the New York Times or the Financial Times allow a certain number of their articles to be given as gift articles you can put on Twitter, etc. And the Washington Post. But their main aim has been to get subscriber base up so that on the basis that this is a reliable font of information. Now, they do have a lot of subscribers, but it doesn't compare with what you're saying. I think we've got to keep on hitting the message, Lisa, and I think that where you are in your position, you do that. You believe in journalism. You have to keep on repeating the message that journalism is about citizens. It's about giving citizens the information they need to be free and self-governing. And it's about not manipulating them. So you keep hitting that.
Ben, is a counter-offensive helping or bringing people together, or is it encamping people?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. We have to go on the offensive, but we must not use the same tactics as our adversaries. We cannot descend to the level of those who try to slice and dice and manipulate populations in order to deliver their messaging. Instead, I think it's about making the case for the sort of quality journalism that we see here at CapeTalk and elsewhere. This stuff has to be part of the solution. But also, just a point on one of the tactics that are used sometimes. So there is a network called Doppelganger, which is related to, which is a Russian-sponsored network. And what they do is they put out like fake news sites, right, which try to actively impersonate real news sites. And so, if you look at the URL bar, right, it will be slightly different than the actual one of the real news site, and the story will be erroneous. But when you click on the links on the page, it will then take you to the real website, so it looks convincing. And that's why I think what you mentioned, Lester, of some sort of watermarking where you're actually able to verify information. We might find in a number of years' time that that's where we move towards. And there's certainly a lot of interesting work that's already going on at the moment in that direction.
Well, we saw where the blue check mark got us over the last... I want to open it up to our audience. I particularly would ask Consul General, sorry for putting you on the spot, but we spoke about a year of elections. Germany goes to elections. I don't want you to step into the party political, but how do you feel on diplomatic level, dealing with the government of South Africa and your colleagues overseas? How important is this conversation?
Very important. Thank you very much, Lester. Thank you to you and to the panel. It's actually a really great and interesting discussion that has been followed by us very closely for a couple of not only months, but years, actually. So disinformation is something that is a big concern on the federal foreign ministries level in Germany. Our current foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, encouraged all of us already a couple of years ago to go out, the consul generals, the ambassadors, to go out also on social media, not only to positively report back on what we are doing, which is already very successful, but also to, and I liked what Anna pointed out, in a humorous way, to try to, detect the manipulation that's going on. You might remember that there was a post from, I think it was the Russian embassy here in South Africa, and our embassy in Pretoria then put it back, saying something, this is completely fake news, and by the way, when it comes to talk about Nazis, we unfortunately know what we are talking about. And that was actually a very good way of making clear that A, it's fake, and B, there are ways of tackling it in a nice and smart way and not using the same instruments like our enemies do. Yeah. So, and I must say that for a German diplomat, it's not easy to be out there. That's not necessarily what is the core of our tasks and the core of our profession. But I think it's really very important that we do this, and I must say I like it. And I think when we when we get our act together on the state level, on the social, on the journalist media level, and on the citizens level, we can achieve big things. And it's good, as I said, to talk about what we are doing, to report on social media about what we are doing and what our position is, make it as clear as possible, and maybe even also simple. And then at the same time, be vigilant and educate ourselves and try to attack our enemies. Yeah. So we are doing a couple of seminars with this and invite people. We have a good relationship with Code for Africa, Justin Arenstein, who might be known to you. Check Africa, they have this absolutely phenomenal WhatsApp group, What's Crap, and they debunk all the misinformation. I think there is a lot of positive things going on there, and I think all of us together we will continue to fight this.
Thank you, Consul
Thank you so
General.
much.
And I'm very much looking forward to our elections, obviously. So we'll see who will be the next government in Germany.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Now,
Sorry, Josey.
Before you say something, there's something that the consul just said right now, and it was quite amazing. The Kenyan president was in Germany, and of course he met the chancellor, and they discussed closed doors, whatever. The next thing, there's a tweet on X that, so we've discussed that there are 250,000 jobs, I think, for 250,000 jobs for Kenyans, and in an hour or so, the German government also tweets, it's fake news, it's a lie. And this is coming from a head of state, government to government. So now it is not the public to blame, it is not media, these are governments attacking each other on social media. Your thoughts on that, Ben, and probably also Anna and Pippa?
It's so difficult, isn't it, Josey? Because you have to respond quickly so it doesn't become viral. But at the same time, you have to do your due diligence on these different claims that get thrown around. I mean, one thing that, and I'm not sure it would have been useful in that example, but one thing that a lot of organisations have found to be really helpful to try to respond as quick as you can to disinformation is to try and predict what types of narratives are going to pop up. And when I read some of the analysis from here in South Africa of the election, a lot of the different claims that were made had actually also been made in previous elections. So a lot of work can be done in forecasting the types of disinformation that might come up at different moments in time. And if you do that, you're in a better place to respond quickly.
Right.
If you're asking a question and you're standing up, please introduce yourself. You are being broadcast, and we'd like to put a name to the pretty and/or handsome faces that will be on our screens. Please stand.
Okay, I'm Zulfa Khan. I'm the Deputy Editor here at EWN in Primedia Broadcasting, Cape Town. We have a lot of young reporters and journalists I see in the room, so following on from that topic or that discussion and that you mentioned now, I'd like to ask Pippa, and I forget the last panelist's name, just in terms of practically for any journalist that's entering now into the industry or been, when there's like disinformation or fake news possibly being shared on social media, because this is also where we get a lot of tips for story ideas or things that are happening. Can you give our young journalists some advice on how to, on a practical level, day to day, do you figure out or check how this is true or not true? What do you do?
Should I
Go ahead.
You know, so Zulfa, yeah, nice to see you. I hear you on air all the time. But there's an old adage in journalism about verifying. When your mother says she loves you, check it out. Oh. You don't trust anything that you see without first checking it. So there are a lot of narratives, and I'm sure Ben knows many in the American elections, for instance, about inflation was rising. Here I hear on air and I see figures about inflation, unemployment, etc. There are quite a lot of experts around, and it's really important to encourage reporters before you say things like teen pregnancies have soared or you can't get a job with a university degree. Neither of those things are true, by the way. You need to actually go to the sources. Stats SA, they're good institutes at Stellenbosch University, at UCT, at WITS, that you can find out in just one call, one email. Just check it out before you believe what a politician says. So your job is to report what a politician says, but it's also to follow up, and I am aware of the pressure of deadlines, but to follow up and actually do a fact check on what they say. But that's a reporter's job. That's your huge value to society.
And on digital online verification?
Yeah, so there are a couple of sites or even browser plugins that they could use. In fact, there's one that I've just tried. It's called InvidV Verify, which is particularly for reporters or journalists. And that will help you to maybe speed up some of the verification. And then the old school stuff, like going to Snopes, doing an image reverse search on Google, just that exactly what Pippa said, just that zero trust, like don't even trust your mom, And it's so important because, we talk about this in security so often that particularly those WhatsApp groups or even, contacts that you trust, they could be compromised or impersonated. And then it sounds like the person, it looks like the person, you still have to verify. So, yeah, and there's a couple of others. And something that I was thinking about that we should be doing as a community with the media, and you're doing a great job of it already. Like I often hear about CapeTalk, for example, talking about disinformation, etc. But to run a more organized campaign, really do some digital literacy training from the media for the citizens and the journalists maybe as well, and do that maybe together with the German consulate or our government. And if I think about how well the city of Cape Town did during the water shortage campaign, they really got everybody engaged. And yes, I understand that campaigning is not cheap, but even at a grassroots level, I think we can do a lot. A lot of these sites are there. A lot of the fact that there's the What's Crap WhatsApp group, everybody should know about that. And if we could maybe coordinate and work together, and just share what's out there already.
I became the policeman in our broader family WhatsApp group, and particularly around the pandemic, and I would be the one to say,
Mom-in-law is the worst.
This is fake, or have you checked, and added the links. And you're right, it's an attitudinal and habitual change. Because now I have other aunties in the group who are acting as police. Now they're the experts on digital disinformation.
That's awesome.
But
Is that because they blocked you, Lester?
Exactly. There is a critique. If you know Charlie Brooker, he does a show on BBC called, or it was ITV, called Newswipe. It was a critique of the media. And he detailed, this is the standard BBC news reporter walking down a high street talking to the camera, and then he goes on and he says, and then talking to strangers in the streets who know nothing about the subject. That is the vox pop. It's said that Donald Trump won the US president election because he spoke to people. I'd like you, as a veteran in journalism, the role of what we call the vox pop, the role of going to communities and actually speaking to them. How important is that to build not only the trust in media, but actually, yes, the analysts and the experts are important, but actually taking a temperature of what communities are experiencing?
In radio and in print, the vox pop, it does give a voice. It's also it's sometimes nice to listen to, but in the same way, don't trust it. I remember, I think I was here, it was about 10 years ago in the elections of 2014, and one reporter wrote in a story, she'd gone to do local reporting, and she said unemployment in Knysna had risen. And I said, how do you know this? She said, 2 ladies at the bus stop told her. So I said, well, can we just check with Stats SA? And they do. But in fact, I actually checked with an economist who was very skeptical then of the capacity of Stats SA. He said, the 2 ladies at the bus stop may have known more. But anyway, the principle is when people make very strong factual claims in vox pops, to check them out with people you know, I think. But they are nice to do.
Right.
Let's go to our audience.
Good morning. My name is Zuki. I'm a long-time CapeTalk listener. I don't want to sound defeatist, but do you think there really is hope? Because it feels like to me that the polarization has gotten so strong that these interventions that you're talking about people fact-checking, etc., almost seem like they're going to polarize more because people are going to check against the things that they believe are fact. That coupled with, I know there's a feeling, especially in South Africa, that the media has an agenda and that the media are reporting certain things because they're controlled by a certain sector. So it just feels like fact has become subjective. So how is that going to be counted?
My quick response to that, I'm still waiting for my paycheck for Big Pharma. Because apparently I was paid by Big Pharma to push vaccines that did go about saving lives. So that would be my answer to that. Ben, would you like to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think it's a fair critique. It can feel in among people who are within journalism or counter disinformation like we're in a castle under siege, and we're trying to deal with that by upping the production of shields. Now, that doesn't help you win new ground. And what we need to do now is to go beyond countering disinformation and think about how do we win that ground, how do we win that trust, how do we inspire again. And if we manage to do that, then I think we'll find new adherents. But the starting point has got to be understanding who people do trust, why people trust, and then acting on that evidence.
One more?
One more question.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ivio Pagate from UC Radio. I'm also a current undergraduate student in multimedia journalism. I actually wanted to ask, so earlier on you guys were discussing a lot about social media and, the whole panel's about polarization, how aspects like social media can affect that, especially within my generation, which is the younger generation, who tend to get their primary news source being TikTok especially, which is started off as a short form content based platform where people don't really actually sit and watch a full video, even if it is from a reliable source. They kind of just watch the first 15 seconds and call it a day, really. And people have also become very disillusioned to traditional news, especially because of the subscription aspect, because the generation, especially with the current economic climate, have become very upset and disillusioned to subscription services as a whole. And so people have begun to get a bit disgruntled with that, especially in the context of traditional news. So I'm trying to ask, especially for young professionals like myself going into the industry, especially in this particular climate and this time, what are ways which we can look at to combat the current sort of disillusionment with current news, and news companies needing to meet their bottom line and be able to produce news, needing to use subscription services, was also looking at the youth's perspective regarding subscription services and sort of meeting us in the middle, so to speak.
Could I answer that by doing a poll with the people here in the audience? And how many of you have a Netflix account? Paid for Netflix account? How many of you have a Disney Plus account? How many of you have a iTunes or a Spotify account? How many of the South Africans here are subscribed to News 24? How many of you have a New York Times subscription? My question to you, why do you see the utility, the benefit of all those other subscriptions, but not a subscription to quality, professional, credible news media? That would be my response, and I put it to our panel.
Because it's not entertainment, right? And I think that's where I always come back to. If we look at Finland, for example, or these countries that have identified cognitive security as a national security defense, they are investing in their people's critical thinking. So in Finland, when you start primary school, they make you look at news articles, not just from within Finland, but from 5 other countries. And I think that's where we need to go as well, is that in our education system, we have to teach people or kids how to develop that analytical, skeptical, not paranoid, but sort of careful, vigilant mind, and and the benefit of subscribing to quality news. But then, there's also the reality, like the lady, sorry, I forgot your name, but the lady said that, the economics, etc. So if I only have 100 Rand a month and I want to be entertained, then I'll sign up with Netflix and not read the news, because I get the news from the bus stop anyway, So maybe there's something that could be done to have a free subscription to the younger generation, or share more important articles for free. I don't know, it is a difficult business model.
If you live in the city of Cape Town and you go to the library and get yourself a library card, there's a partnership with the city of Cape Town and Press Reader, where you have access to all these titles for free.
But then we still should, and maybe that needs to be sponsored by industry, government, whoever, we must still put emphasis on the importance of quality news, right? And get that out to the people that can't afford it, or at least some of it, so whether it's political, articles, whatever it might be.
Pippa?
Just make two quick points. I think it's a really important question you ask, but I don't think we should despair. But that is why the public broadcaster is so important, because the public broadcaster is supposed to provide a public service. If you're sitting in Limpopo and you want the news in Chibenda, you should be able to get it, and that is what the public broadcaster is supposed to do. That's my real worry about the decline of the public broadcaster. Or if you want to listen to Mhlobo Wenene, you should be able to get news and current affairs frequently. The second part about your question about it being boring, the news, well, partly that's why we have to up our game. That's why we have to develop a kind of narrative storytelling journalism, which radio is the perfect medium for, but also newspapers, or, when I say newspapers, I mean online, is probably the most compelling way to get messages across. But it costs money, because you've got to invest in talent, you've got to actually go out and speak to people, not just trawl online. So those are, I think, the two answers, and hope if we can get that message across, we begin to find a different path. I'm not saying reverse the trend, but find a different path.
Right. Now, thank you so much. Our topic has been politics, polarization, and the role of the media. We have a lot of viewers watching us right now, and also everybody in this room. Now, from you, our panelists, take-home message. We'll start with you, Ben.
What I would say is this. There is an assault on truth, which is taking place. There are those who try to manipulate information and try to make you disbelieve things which are true. We all have a role to play within our families, within our communities, within our schools, within our universities, within our workplaces. Encourage people to be skeptical. Have the confidence in that conversation to say, are you sure about that? What was your source? Where did you read that? And if we do that, then we'll really move towards a response that's a lot more inclusive and a lot more whole society than where we are at the moment.
Thank you. And Pippa?
Thank you. I mean, I agree with Ben, is that we can do that in our communities and families. I think that as journalists, and speaking as that, you have to emphasize the quality of journalism, improve the quality, improve the fact-checking, whatever medium you use, and support broadcasters who reach a number of, like millions of people potentially, and get a public broadcaster that is, truly world-class, which I think we can get.
Right, thank you. Anna?
Yeah, obviously, my echo chamber here, I echo what you said, but on top of it, I'd like to just emphasize that those skills are no longer tech skills, they are life skills, and they will also protect you against the scammers, the social engineers, the job scammers, the fraudsters. Like, they all use the same techniques. They all do. It's emotions that get triggered, it's urgency, it's a level of, it's always a human element. We call social engineers human hackers. It's the same thing. They use the same tactics. So if you can defend yourself to, look through disinformation or be politically more savvy, you will also be safer online and defend against the scammers and the fraudsters that are, by the way, also, they have access to all the tools and the AI. So the power that these syndicates have go way beyond the North Koreans and the state-sponsored actors nowadays.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Round of applause.
To to our panel. Thank you
so much.
so
You've
much.
been amazing.
Really appreciate my quiet moments. I'm incredibly bleak, but in my group moments, even if it's people I fundamentally disagree with, there is cause for hope and optimism, and I have a little seed planted of optimism. So, ladies and gentlemen, to you, thank you so much. To you watching us at home, and to our panelists, thank you very much. To close off this session on the first DW Cape Talk forum, I want to call on Assumpta Latus, who is the DW head of English in Africa, for your few words.
Yes. Well, what a panel. I just hope that nobody has become paranoid today and going back home without trusting anyone. So that is, I mean, the messages that I'm taking with me, and I think everybody have to think about it, is that what kind of responsibility I have whenever I receive any message, any news from my WhatsApp channel or from any source or any platform that I use. Have I checked it? And what is my responsibility to everything that I consume? That's one, as we, as people. As for media houses like us, we have to be a little bit younger and revamp ourselves. And if we can't beat them, then probably we should join them, isn't it? So that the younger people also could get the verified information that they need. And for the politicians, probably speak to the hearts of the people and make democracy sex again, which I think is very, very important. And I mean, this wouldn't have happened if Tessa and her team here in Cape Town were not here and haven't done everything that they have done. Thank you very much, Tessa, and your team as well, CapeTalk. This is incredible. I just can't find any word that I can express my thanks to everyone who has been part of this organization. Thank you very much, the panelists. That was incredible as well, and I think everybody is going back home. For anyone who is home today also has lots of takeaway and to think about and how we consume news and also make the world a better place, and our moderators as well. Thank you very much. I can't forget my colleague here who has organized the whole thing. I mean, put together DW and CapeTalk together to organize this. Odail and your team distribution. Thank you very much. That's incredible. Thank you so much. And Marie Louise is somewhere running around, and yeah, that's the team from Germany, from Bonn, Germany. Thank you very much, everyone. And I will give it back to you, or is it?
My final word is to say thank you so much to Josey. It's been absolutely remarkable working with you over the last few days, and thank you again to our panel. I go with home with lots to think about and building a better world. Josey?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really learned a lot. And like I said, I mean, we have a podcast, DW Africa Link podcast, and I already have 3 experts. All the time you'll be getting phone calls from me whenever we have a topic. But also to ask my boss, can I just stay longer and work here in Cape Town because it's snowing back home?
Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're going to do so safely, we'll see you again next year.